guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about the best travel destinations for female solo travelers. For everybody who doesn't know me, hi, my name is Amelie Zatzka. I'm a photo artist and digital nomad for 1.5 years now. But even before becoming a digital nomad, I traveled around a lot as a solo traveler. And I want to talk to you about my experiences and what I actually also calculate if I look into traveling to a new country, because I have a bunch of benchmarks which actually prove over and over to be right, and which shows you if it's actually more safe country or less a safe country for women. So before I start, I just quickly wanted to say that this is on my experience. Obviously, there are incidents happening probably in every country every day. So this is just how I felt being in the country as a woman, how safe I felt, how I felt people behaving towards me on a regular basis, and how it is in the general feeling of being in a country. The first country which I would list as very, very safe is actually my home country, which is Germany. And I've lived there for 27 years, and from all of the traveling experiences, I think there was hardly any country where I felt more safe than in Germany. Maybe it is because I'm from there, but honestly, I lived in Munich for 27 years and there was hardly any incident. Of course, there are some weird stuff here and there sometimes happening, but it was very rare. Whereas in Berlin, I think you should be a bit more aware. Obviously, there are much more people from different cultures, different countries, a lot of drugs in Berlin. So I think Berlin is not necessarily the safest area in Germany. But in general, Germany is very safe for women. Another country which I would list as very safe for women is Italy, especially the north of Italy. I hardly ever been to the south, like Sicily and stuff like that. I only been there once, and I heard that there's more mafia going on. So maybe not the safest area, but all the way down until kind of the bottom of Italy is very safe for women. I always felt really welcomed by the Italian people, and it was just always a really pleasant experience. And I've been there, I can't even count how many times I've been in Italy. I also lived there last year for 3 months. So yeah, Italy is one of the safest countries I know. But before I go on and start listing all of the European countries, I just wanted to say that I literally have absolutely no hesitation traveling alone as a woman to any of them. Of course, there can always be some incident, but the general feeling is very safe. I lived in Barcelona for 3 months. I can't even count how many times I've been to France. I also been a lot of times to Austria, to Switzerland, to the Netherlands. I've been to Greece. So I've been very much around, and there's not much threats to women. Obviously, should always be aware of pickpocketing and stuff like that. But all of the European countries I would travel to without any hesitation. The next country I felt very safe traveling to was actually Nepal, which is kind of surprising because I think Nepal is still one of the poorest countries in the world. But honestly, being there, I never felt threatened once, and there were a bunch of situations where they actually could have done me wrong because I was very young. I was 19. I was not very experienced in traveling. So for example, I was walking around Kathmandu with my camera, a kind of expensive camera, trying to capture the whole atmosphere, and I got lost a little and it got dark and I couldn't find my way back home. So situations like that. We, for example, also never really locked our door. I was volunteering there, and there were a bunch of volunteers who shared a room, and we were never locking our doors, so people could have easily gotten stuff out of it, but nothing ever happened. And I tell you in a second why that might be, but in general, I would say I felt really, really safe actually in Nepal as a woman alone. The fourth country is Iceland. I felt very safe in Iceland. It's a very small country with only a few people, so I think everybody knows each other in some kind of way. And that results in a lot of trust, which is great. For example, people don't necessarily lock their door. And that results in some kind of issues sometimes. Like we experienced on our first night in Reykjavik, we were actually arriving very late and we had booked an Airbnb, and then we made our way to the Airbnb, got into our room, and there were two random people sleeping in our beds. And firstly, we were, of course, very, very confused, and we really wanted to have our bed or like some kind of sleep. And it turned out that these were the guests who were supposed to stay in the apartment above us, but because every apartment is open, they just reckoned that this is their apartment, and they just made themselves comfortable and and just fell asleep in our bed, obviously, because it was very late at night. And then we called our Airbnb host, and in the end, it was very good because then we could just switch apartments. So we went to their apartment, they had our apartment, so it was easy. But that's how it is, like people don't lock their door, and that can result in other people sleeping in your bed accidentally. The next country where I felt very safe in is Australia. I traveled there when I was 19 as well, and I just traveled around the whole continent, and it was just a very good experience. I mean, there are areas where you feel more safe and less safe, obviously, like everywhere, but in general, I would put it pretty much in the same category than Europe. So it's very Western and like comparably very safe for women. The next one is not a country, but a very popular travel destination. That's why I wanted to mention it here as well, which is Dubai. Dubai is in the United Arab Emirates, and that's why I personally was a little surprised how safe I felt in Dubai. Honestly, I think Dubai was the place I felt the most safe in the whole world so far, even more safe than in Munich. I think the reason behind that is that there are a lot of cameras and very, very strict rules what happens to people who do stuff like pickpocketing, but also like worse stuff like raping. I think behind rape there's actually a death sentence, so there's not much crime there, and I felt very, very safe on the streets. Also on the trains there are like separate areas for women, so you can just sit there, and I never had any incident. And also on the streets, I didn't have the feeling that anybody was like looking weirdly at me or catcalling me or doing anything, nothing at all. So I felt very, very safe. The next one is Singapore, and it falls a little in the same category than Dubai in the sense of that it is probably that safe because there's a lot of like cameras around, a lot of like tracking what people are doing, and a lot of evidence if something happens. That's bad and good, you can decide yourself, but I just felt really safe and really comfortable traveling around Singapore as a woman, and I also had no threatening experience at all. And the last country I wanted to mention is Canada. I've been in Canada at a host family when I was 16 for a month, and it was just a very good experience. I lived in Maple Ridge, which is like, I think around 2 hours of the public transport from Vancouver. So I had to go quite far if I wanted to go to the city, but I never felt threatened. I always felt like all of the people are so friendly, so helpful, and honestly, it was probably one of the best like countries to send a young girl to if she wants to be like independent and go and travel the world. So I'm very, very grateful that my parents gave me this opportunity. Now, very quickly, some countries where I didn't feel safe at all as a woman. The first one sadly has to be USA, except I would say from New York area. In New York, I felt very safe. But especially on the West Coast, like in LA and in San Francisco, I had quite a bit of unpleasant experiences. For example, I made the big mistake that I thought I just booked myself a hostel in LA downtown because it sounds like that's the center, right? It's not great there, and I would not recommend anybody to stay in LA downtown. And I just was looking up how to get from LA downtown to Venice Beach because I wanted to see Venice Beach, and walk to the next recommended bus station. Nobody takes public transport in LA, by the way. But the end of the story is that I was walking to the bus station and I ended up in Skid Row. So if you don't know what Skid Row is, it's a very big homeless camp, kind of. It's a whole area in LA downtown, which is like basically full of homeless people and their tents. And that would not necessarily be a big issue for me. I've seen quite a bit of like homeless people around Asia as well, but the difference is that they're like all under drugs, like they're like zombie. It's like zombie land there, and it was very threatening. And there were like homeless people coming towards me, screaming at me, threatening me. And I just was really lucky to get like on the next bus, even though I didn't have a ticket, didn't have like any cash, but the bus driver was like, just come in. And I was just going, even though it was not my bus, and I was just driving out of this area to feel safe again. The next country I not necessarily would recommend for beginner travelers, if you can say that, is South Africa. If you have seen any of my other videos, you know that I personally love South Africa, and it's probably my favorite travel destination. I would always go back there. But if it comes to safety, it is definitely not the safest country. There are a bunch of people who have weapons. I heard a lot of different stories from like my friends who got pickpocketed or like threatened on the open street to give like away their belongings. I had one friend who got shot in the leg. So there are things happening. And if you've seen the rape scala, I think South Africa is like the country with the most rape after India. So there are a lot of things happening, and you should be very aware of it. I generally never felt threatened in Cape Town or in South Africa in general, but I was also being aware in the sense of that I would take Ubers when it was dark, so I was not walking alone on the streets anymore, or I tried to avoid it. Sometimes I just did it, but generally you should avoid it as a woman. Like a bunch of stuff which you like just be aware of, which areas you go to, etc. Another country which I not necessarily really liked as a woman is, to be honest, Indonesia. Not that I ever felt like threatened very badly, but I just got catcalled a lot. There were a bunch of situations where I didn't feel 100% safe. For example, I was having like a cold coconut at the beach at a Varung, and it gets dark really quickly there. So I was watching the sunset from this Varung, and then I was walking back on the beach, and it was already dark by then. And there are a bunch of groups of like teenagers, like male teenagers, who like surrounded me and was like, I don't know, saying like catcalling me and like being harassing. And that not only happened once, but a bunch of times. Also, for example, one time at night, I had to go from the beach to my scooter. It was like maybe 200 meters, maybe 100, not very far. And I had to pass or go past a group of men, and they were walking in the same direction, but when I was passing them, they were like very harassing, like, hey, do you want to have sex? And I don't know, just nothing you would like to hear when you're alone at night as a woman. So there were a bunch of situations. I got catcalled a lot also at day, and I also felt very much sexualized, even like from other people around me, like from other Indonesian friends. And the last country I wanted to mention where it didn't feel safe is Colombia. Generally, I think most of the South American countries are not necessarily the safest to travel to as a female solo traveler. At the time in Colombia, I was not traveling alone. I was with my boyfriend at the time, but still like out at night. Even with him, we felt threatened quite a bit. But generally, just the whole atmosphere, you know, there's a lot of poverty and a bit of a history with drugs, especially cocaine, and it's still lingering in this whole atmosphere of the country. It is a beautiful country, but nevertheless, I didn't feel really safe as a woman. Okay, and quickly some factors that I look at when I travel to a new country or want to travel to a country, which maybe helps you to estimate how safe a country is for women. Firstly, is obvious, like how poor or how wealthy are the people in a country. So most of the Western countries are mostly like wealthier, and that's probably mostly also why it's safer. The second factor I put into my calculation is like the religion of a country. And honestly, I realize it more and more the more I travel. Basically, what I mean with that is that in countries where they practice Hinduism or Buddhism, I generally feel much more safe. And I think the reason behind it is that they have like a whole different way of thinking about like the whole life, especially like in Hinduism, they have like karma, and they think if they do something wrong, they will like regret it in the next life. So that results in like less crime. And in Buddhism, it's more like you don't want to have any earthly belongings, and you're like very centered within yourself, and that also results in not being jealous or like trying to get something from somebody. Whereas I have to say, in countries where there's a monotheism, like Christian countries, Muslim countries, and Jewish countries, I not necessarily felt that safe, and that are, depending on how poor or rich they are, they're like one of the countries where I felt the least safe while traveling. So that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. And if you know any other countries where you personally traveled to and felt very safe as a female solo traveler, please let me know in the comments, and we can make like a little collective list of a bunch of countries where it's very safe for women. And then I'll see you in my next video. Bye!